So glad to have all of you guys here tonight. Ted, this is my first time actually getting to meet with you. I've talked to you before in the past. Um, and I'm very interested to hear about your story, guys. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a situation that is one of the craziest situations I've ever had to talk about on the show. The two gentlemen on the screen, Ted and Adam down at the bottom left, have been fighting against the gender transition of their children. And is one of the most evil things I've ever heard of. And, you know, as a couple of years ago, when I first heard from Ted, the censorship that they have towards this issue, we can talk about this now, but not long ago, you weren't allowed to speak up about it or anything. Not only did you have to accept it, it was just one of these issues like that came, it feels like it came out of nowhere. But Ted, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how this situation made its way to you.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark. I'm sorry, Mark down there on the lower right, and Eric. Yeah, we talked in the past. It's been a few years. Of course, I know Adam a bit because we sort of swapped war stories and a little bit been in the same boat. So, you know, I'm a dad of two sons. They're both. The older one is 21, who was the one who became, let's just say, confused about his sexual identity, or gender, and then a younger one who's 19. They both, you know, they're no longer minors in California, so I'm thankfully no longer in the family court or involved in a custody case. But what happened to me, you know, I had a 20 plus year marriage. We had two boys. My both were born, in fact, at University of California, San Francisco. The older one was born there 2004, and the doctors proclaimed that he was a male and put that on his birth certificate. There was no confusion at the time, but about the time he turned 15, after his freshman year in high school at a very liberal, progressive, private Catholic school in Berkeley, where he was introduced to gender ideology and a very permitting or supportive faculty who later we discovered had taken training in gender ideology from the doctors and staff at UCSF. My son became gender incongruent very suddenly, told his mother, who told me, and concurrent to that, mom split. She separated at that moment from the marriage, and she took both of our sons with her. My younger son came back home. He was, I think, 11 or 12 at the time. Literally walked back home and came back into the house. COVID-19 happened. This is what I just described happened in the summer of 2019.
Okay.
My ex-wife filed for divorce on the last day of 2019. Before we could get into courts or the court, COVID-19 happened. So California court shut down for a number of months, and we eventually had a hearing, over teleconference Zoom, in the Contra Costa Superior Court Family Court Division before a Judge Joni Hiramoto, which I later learned Judge Hiramoto had a number of conflicts of interest of her own, which she did not disclose, such that she had taken training again from UCSF's gender center doctors, and in fact later taught gender ideology courses to other judges and to minors councils, in which he said that a parent's basic denial of reality, denying that their boy is a boy and not saying that the boy is a girl, was a basis to strip custody. And that's what happened to me. I attempted for a long time to overturn the custody order unsuccessfully. It's really quite a long story, which we probably don't need to get into. I talked about it publicly
and
before.
we'll get some more into it. So,
yeah.
About how old was your son the first time you heard him
He was
thinking that
15.
he might
He was
be the opposite
15,
sex?
15 years and maybe a month or two.
15. How did you find out about it?
As I was saying, his mother came to me and told me Spencer is transgender, and yeah, that's pretty much how it went down.
You know, I hate asking you to relive this, but like upstairs, tell me like what's going on in the mind when the mom comes to you and tells you this. Like I'm sure there's got to be a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts going on, and it's got to be a tough one to handle.
Well, I knew my son was not a girl. I knew he wasn't anything other than a boy. I mean, I raised him. You know, I changed a lot of diapers those first 3.5, maybe 4 years of his life. So, you know, I was well familiar with what he had downstairs, and he's very much a boy. Um, his mother had been kind of acting a bit erratically maybe the year before, and she also always had been a voracious reader, both of fiction as well as she subscribed to Vanity Fair and Town and Country, you know, the glossy uh, uh, lifestyle magazines of the rich and famous, right? And I do recall that in the maybe 2 years before all this happened, that it seemed like I would look over at my ex-wife's nightstand, and you know, here's this month's Vanity Fair, and it's Caitlyn Jenner. Isn't Caitlyn Jenner stunning and brave? Or the next month might be, here's Angelina Jolie and she's transitioning her children. Isn't she stunning and brave? Or the
Right.
next month it's Charlize Theron doing the same thing. So
Became the
you know,
popular thing.
right. It certainly was being marketed as like something that was, I guess, an aspirational lifestyle thing, maybe to certain people. You know, already at that time, though, I was a little bit aware of this. Certainly, Jeff Younger's custody case back in Texas had gotten some publicity, and I do remember maybe in the 6 or 12 months before this happened in my family, coming home from a commute from work, having, you know, among the things I read, reading about the Younger case. And I remember saying, hey, honey, have you heard about this crazy custody case in Texas where the mom, a doctor of all people, wants to transition the son? Isn't that messed up? Kind of expecting my wife to say, yeah, that's really messed up. Or no, I haven't heard about that. Tell me about it. But, you know, she would basically had sort of no response at all to those observations at the time. You know, I didn't know that the transgender fairy was coming to my house later.
Roughly about like what amount of time was that before you found out about this?
Like I said, you know, when I became aware of the Younger case, or these
No, like before, like yeah, before you mentioned it to your ex about the Younger case.
I would say somewhere, you know, 12 to 6 months before.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thought occurred to me at some point is maybe not instantly, but maybe, is this a copycat? Is this like a divorce tactic? I don't know. I mean, that's I think what was among my initial thoughts, but you know, it sort of shifted because about a week, within a week after she had separated and taken my older son with her, you know, she was still communicating with me through text messages at that time, and she indicated that she wanted to take our son to the UCSF Pediatric Gender Center, and you know, would I go with her? And I did some research, and there was not as much information as is available now. But if you looked hard enough, you could find accounts of families, you know, whose kids had gone through there, and the reports were, it's like the Roach Motel. They check in and they never check out. Every single one will get prescribed puberty blockers, and you know, if you separately looked, you could find information about you know, the lack of proven safety, and a lot of harmful side effects, health effects from those drugs. So you know, my initial I guess, reaction to my wife was, we need to be really cautious of engaging with them. Maybe we can make an appointment, just you and me, the parents, and meet with the doctors, because I've got a lot of questions. And as that played out, UCSF refused to meet just with the parents. They insisted that it be the parents with the child, and I didn't like that idea, because I had very pointed questions, not angry or mean or rude questions, but pointed questions about, well, Dr. Rosenthal, I've read your paper, and it seems like you're not collecting data, and it seems like you're using very subjective, um, uh, not even measurements, subjective analysis, and you're also applying Delphi consensus, which is basically, you get a bunch of people in the room who already agree with you, and you poll them, and you say, well, look, everybody says this is good, so therefore it's good. That's not how you do science.
Gotcha. Really quick, not to hop around all over the place, but I do want to get to Adam really quick, because I think this is really interesting. We see this, and your son's 15 when you're finding this out, but we see this, guys, early, all the way up until like babies. We're hearing about some of these cases, and that's kind of more the case we're seeing here in Adam's story. Now, Adam's been on Dad Talk numerous times before, but I'm sure there's going to be numerous people that may not have seen this before. So, Adam, if you don't mind, maybe tell everybody a little bit about your story and how you became aware of this issue with your child.
Yeah. Thanks again, Eric, for having me on. Ted, it's good to see you. Mark, always good to see you, brother. I found out that my son was being dressed as a girl at 2 years old. From a text message. So me and my son's mother were separated at the time. We were never married. We were boyfriend and girlfriend. We were separated at the time. I had just gotten off work, and I got a text message of my son in a pink tutu, like a ballerina costume. And I was sitting there with my dad, and I showed my pop. I said, "Pop, how could she do this to my son?" And my dad looked at me. He goes, "I don't know." So I sent off a bunch of text messages basically saying, "Hey, he's a boy, not a girl. Stop doing this to my son." And I had thought it had stopped. I thought that issue was, I thought I had made my point very clear that I didn't want my son to be dressed in girls' clothes. And about a year later, on his third birthday, I had him for his birthday. We went out to a place called Jumpin' Jammin'. I invited my buddy and his two boys. We had a great time for his birthday. This was his third birthday. And we get home, have pizza. And at the time we were potty training Aiden at the time. And Aiden comes to me and goes, "Hey, Dad, I got to go to the bathroom." I said, "Great, pal." I said, "Do you want to go by yourself or do you need help?" He's all, "No, I want to go by myself." I said, "Awesome. Let me know if you need help." So he went in there, did his thing. He came back out, said, "Dad, I need help washing my hands." And when we finished washing his hands, that's when he told me that Mom had bought him a pink dress. And the way I tell everybody, and the way I'm telling you guys, is I got down on one knee. I looked him in the eye. I said, "Hey, buddy, you're a boy, and boys don't wear dresses." And I had thought I had stopped at that point. And he said, "Okay, Daddy." We went back to cake and ice cream. And a couple of days later, I was hot. I was angry. Because I'm traditional. I'm a traditional father. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. So I sent out a group of text messages to my son's mother, and in none of those text messages were there any threats of violence to her. There was no threats of violence to him. No threats of kidnapping, no threats of like any kind. It was bad words, but it was basically saying he's a boy, not a girl. Stop dressing my son in girls' clothes. And about a week later, is when I get hit with a temporary restraining order. And that put me restrained from Aiden and my son's mother. So we go to court. Long story short, the judge out of Pasadena, Judge Harvey Silverman, ordered a gender assessment to be done on my son. At the time, my son was just getting ready to turn 3 years old. And let me tell you guys, they cut me out of everything. It was very one-sided. They never, like, I didn't have an attorney, a competent attorney, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But he believed that what they were doing to Aiden was right, and he never fought for me. He never fought for Aiden. He never fought for me to get my voice, the father, out there. So Judge Harvey Silverman orders a gender assessment to be done on my 4-year-old son at Children's Hospital Los Angeles by Dr. Jonathan Juarez. I begged to sit in on that assessment. That was denied. I begged for a phone call. That was denied. I went as far as hiring my own child therapist to go to this assessment, and not to sway left or right, but to sit in there as my voice to find out what there's going on. Because anytime I went on, yeah, go ahead, Ted.
What year was this at Children's Hospital LA that the gender assessment happened? You said he was 4, but what year was that?
It was probably 21, 2021.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in,
No,
Eric.
go ahead, Ted.
But there's
Eric, you're muted.
Yeah, I saw that. I was actually going to say, when you guys are listening to each other, if you would, please, you hear something, ask questions. I know you've known each other for a while, but
Yeah.
you guys are probably going to hear a lot, even though there's a big difference in age, that you relate to. So I would love to hear it. Go ahead, Ted.
I'm still confused on the gender assessment, but we'll get to that later.
So
Yeah.
4 years old, what year?
21, I believe.
Okay, so 2021. So Children's Hospital LA, by that point, was participating, and not just participating, was the lead site in a 4-site study funded by National Institute of Health for the effects of puberty blocker and cross-sex hormones on children. And that study had begun in 2016. UCSF also is one of the sites. Lurie's children in Chicago and Boston's children are the other two sites. What's very interesting is that some documents recently produced in a Freedom of Information Act request through the efforts of Dr. Michael Laidlaw obtained some correspondence from a doctor at Children's Hospital, another doctor at UCSF, exactly about this. And one of the things that happened in 2023 was they revised their informed consent process, suggesting that there were problems with the earlier informed consent process. But in this set of emails, it appears that NIH unilaterally said that one parent's consent was sufficient. Now, that's a bureaucratic organization. That wasn't done by any change of law or by a court. That's just something that appears a bureaucrat at NIH did at the behest of UCSF and Children's Hospital. There's a lot more I can say about that, but I think it's really key for people to understand that your son was at a research institute that was looking into these very profitable procedures, as was UCSF.
And Ted, go ahead. I was going to say, Ted, if you could tell everybody where NIH gets its funding from and what is the name of the drug that they use.
Well, National Institutes for Health is a federal agency. It's part of the federal budget. Where the money specifically comes from, you might know that better than me.
It's our tax dollars that are putting Lupron in children.
Yeah.
So we're paying our tax dollars go to NIH, which then goes to UCSF and UCLA, and then they take Lupron, which is not FDA approved for children,
but
put Lupron in a child with our tax dollars.
And the Lupron comes from, they're using it on sex offenders in prison.
I was going to say, please make the audience aware between you gentlemen what Lupron is.
Yeah, and it's it costs 43. I believe I read somewhere that it's about $43,000, the cost of Lupron. So, and there's another puberty blocker out there. I don't know the name, but it's the the premium one, I guess if you want to call it, is a little over $100,000 for the premium puberty blocker. So these medications that they're given to our children, puberty blockers, Lupron specifically, was used to castrate pedophiles in jail, and they're giving that to our children as young as 12 years old in the state of California. I can't speak for any other state because I don't know, but as in California, it's as young as 12.
I mean, from what I know, when they say puberty blocker, that's the drug that they are referring to.
Yes.
The majority of the time, which is crazy to think something that was used to castrate sex offenders is being used as experiments on our children. And there's people advocating for this stuff. Obviously, if they're going to, there's a boy going through this transition, and it would castrate him as they did with the sex offenders. I don't know. This is why I'm asking you guys. Is this something that they're giving to the girls that are transitioning to, and what does it specifically do for them?
So Lupron is a trade name for, I think the chemical is lupronide acetate. There's a couple of acetate molecule drugs that effectively have the same I guess action. There is a legitimate known use for Lupron, and it's used in some certain cancers such as endometriosis. I believe that's like cancer of the ovaries and the female reproductive system. It's used in that case, but as Adam noted, these acetate drugs have been and are used to chemically castrate male sex offenders. My son did not get Lupron, although that was one of the 4 choices that were offered. I mean, I learned quite a bit about this after the fact. So going back to my custody case, I was stripped of all custody of just my older son. Initially had the right or the privilege to see the therapist notes. That was taken away. On paper, I was supposed to have access to the medical records, but UCSF foiled that consistently, would not cooperate in my written request for access to the electronic MyCharts. But belatedly, so let me just also say that the custody hearings in my family's case took place between summer of 2019 through the end of 2019. There were multiple hearings on that. I was stripped. I shared custody of my younger child, had shared 50-50 custody and visitation of my younger child. There was never any adjudication against me that I was unfit. And in fact, I actually had offered to volunteer to undertake a full psych evaluation and let them do that, but the judge denied that because she knew I'd be found fit, of course. The judge, however, in her orders did preserve one single right to me, which was that my older son would not be permitted to undergo any gender identity related surgery before he was 18 without the written consent of both parents. And even though I had lost custody, I took a little bit of solace in that nothing drastic would happen, so I thought. But in October of 2020, so about a year after the first custody order was issued, I was opening my quarterly insurance statement, and I saw a $209,820.34 charge at UCSF that had taken place, which I wrote to my ex-wife and her attorney to ask what it was, and it was at that point that my ex-wife conceded or revealed that our son had undergone a outpatient surgery to implant the premium puberty blocker device, trade name Suprelin, which is yet another acetate drug, and had been started on estrogen at the same time.
Let me ask you real quick, Ted. Tell me about the first conversation that you have with your son after you find this out from your ex, and how that went, and how he ended up coming and explaining it to you. I'm just curious what the relationship was like between the two of you after this went on.
Well, I didn't have visitation or custody of him. I'd occasionally see him at the high school that he and his younger son attended. But there really weren't any substantive conversations. He was going through the process, attempting to transition or pretend that he was of the other sex.
So this pretty much just, it drove the wedge in there, the alienation, the whole 9 yards.
I would say so.
Yep. Sounds like it.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. For me, I couldn't say anything when they hit me with the restraining order. I was only allowed 2 FaceTime conversations a week with my son Aiden, and I had to sit there and look at my son in dresses, nail polish, earrings, hair getting long, and I couldn't say nothing to him about it, because if I said something to him about it, it would have been a violation of the restraining order, because they specifically told me in the restraining order that I couldn't talk about male stuff with him or what he was wearing. So if I mentioned any of those things, it would have been a violation of the restraining order. And she put him in rainbow shoes for school. I told her, don't put him in rainbow shoes. She disconnected it, and the next day I was arrested for a restraining order violation.
That's the crazy thing about this. The family courts are messed up already. But and then these particular cases, you add the politics on top of it. It's became very political. We know it has. And from one thing I've seen in many of these cases, I know in Younger's case, I know in yours, Adam, and Harrison's, you get these activist judges. They're very political. They are not ashamed of letting people know, that they're very behind this. And it seems like in these cases, no matter what you do as a father, seems like if you don't want your son to go through with this, doesn't matter. You're kind of screwed. I'm curious, in the courts, Ted, what was that like for you? Did you find yourself up against an activist judge? Was it a little bit more fair? What was it like getting an attorney trying to fight this thing? I want to know about the whole process for you.
Well, again, Judge Hiramoto had a number of conflicts of interest that weren't disclosed, which she should have disclosed, and she should have recused herself. So it was brought to my attention by another parent who was involved in a custody case that had at one point had been before Judge Hiramoto's court. That Judge Hiramoto, coincident to the time that she oversaw my case, had an adult son, I believe maybe 27, 28, who transitioned.
Your judge had a child that transitioned.
Well, yes, but he was an adult.
Still, I understand. Gotcha.
Right. And Judge Hiramoto has talked about the time that her son came out to her adult son came out to her. And she didn't talk about this in court. She talked about it in a gender training that she was providing to minors councils about a year after my son's surgery. So I think in 2021, maybe 2022. She to discuss, and you can find that online. There's a video recording of that class, which Judge Hiramoto co-presented with UCSF's Gender Center's lawyer, Asaf Orr. The coming out story and how Judge Hiramoto fully supported her son's transition. And in that same course, the two presenters also present the lie that puberty blockers are fully reversible, have no ill effects whatsoever. I see Mark smiling down there. And number of other whoppers. But Judge Hiramoto also has taught similar courses to the California Judicial College to other judges. She's taught courses at AFCC, right, Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, again on the benefits of gender transition for kids, as has Judge Mark Juhas, the judge who Adam had the pleasure of his presiding over his case, as well as presiding over the younger Travis, the in LA last year.
Yeah, and my first judge was on the board of directors of the AFCC, and then he recused himself, and then I got to Mark Juhas, who, as everyone knows, was the president of the AFCC. So,
right, and Judge Juhas and doctors from a doctor from UCSF have continued to teach these very same courses as recently as September. They might have done one just this past month at AFCC conferences, despite the CAST review from the UK being published a couple of years ago, the WPATH files and videos being published 2 years ago, as well as the Health and Human Services, the U.S. Health and Human Services Gender Medicine Report, which was first published last May. So they've doubled and tripled down on this ideology, and one has to wonder why.
So, Ted, if I heard you correctly, the judge's son was allowed to wait till after 18 to transition, but yours was not. And only one of your sons, like Younger's kids, was transition, correct?
That's correct. But, you know, one thing that's important to note here is that Judge Hiramoto's adult son, who I guess would now be in his early 30s, in his transition to a female identity, would not have taken puberty blockers because that window would have passed. He already would have gone through and experienced a normal male puberty. So possibly he's taking, estrogen of some form, and perhaps pursuing hair removal and, other body modification. But it's not the same, right? It's not good for you, but not good for men. But that is a bit more reversible than puberty blocking a child, because once that opportunity is gone, it's gone. You don't get that back.
So I'm curious,
and don't let them fool you when they say it's reversible, because it's not reversible. That's one of the things that they tell everybody, is that if they don't like it, they can just stop and they'll go back to normal. From my understanding, the children don't go back to normal, along with all the side effects that this stuff brings onto the children. It's horrendous what this medication and what these doctors are doing to these kids. And there's no repercussions for these judges, these attorneys, these doctors, these therapists. They just walk home scot-free, and they don't have to worry about the damage that they have caused the child, parents, grandparents. They just don't care.
Yet.
Well,
I hope one day, man. I mean, because I just think of how many lives have been ruined with this crap, man. And I mean,
look, Marjorie Taylor Greene has got a bill out there, the Protect Children's Innocence Act, right?
Yeah.
That she has been forcing down the House's throat. They finally voted on it. She leaves, and now that bill is not going to get brought up to the Senate.
Right.
And I wish that bill would get brought up, because that would criminalize a lot of these people for what these experiments that they're doing on children. But I just don't see that, that bill. I mean, even Bonta is urging children's hospitals now to start the gender affirming care back up. Well,
it's one of the reasons I really want to push on this really hard right now. Is I know people get upset when I talk about politics, but this issue is political, guys. You got to understand. And when the last administration came in, there was a lot of talk about these gender transition surgeries for minors. And there was some bills and stuff that went through. But I do believe many people think that when Trump got in and passed some of those laws, that this is not an issue anymore. When I hear the trans issue being brought up, it's talking about men and female sports. They're not talking about the gender transition surgeries for kids anymore. It's like it's not even a thing anymore. Nothing ever happened. Neither. I mean, in you guys' cases, I'm guessing, unfortunately for Ted, his child's grown now. But for you, Adam, Aiden, the situation has not changed. And that is the same for Younger and just about everybody else that I've seen. I'm curious, though, for both of you gentlemen, when you was in the court system. I don't know how much money you spent, what all you done. I'm sure it was a lot during that time, but it seem like anything worked for you at all when you was in there fighting against this for your children?
Not in the family court, no. Not
Do
the
you
California, not the California family court, certainly not.
Do you think anything that if you would have done it different, do you think it would have made a difference?
If I had absconded with my son to another state, maybe.
Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah.
That's the reality for these guys.
Yeah. I mean, even my second attorney, her attorney was fighting was talking about the gender assessment. For 45 minutes, she talked about it. And as soon as my attorney got up to talk and fight what she was saying, Judge Juhas told my attorney, "Sorry, sir, we're not here for a gender debate." My attorney goes, "Wait a second, you just allowed her to speak for 45 minutes about it, and I can't talk about it?" He's all, "No, we're not here for a gender debate." So my attorney was never allowed to fight what she was saying. And I don't know what the legal words for it is, but he was not allowed to help defend my son and defend me on what she was doing. And that was it. They never listened to my attorney, when it came to it.
Well, even that process in and of itself, man, getting an attorney, we know the scum that attorneys can be in the first place. But for you guys having to go into an attorney and explain this case, what you're needing them, I mean, just this whole process has got to be overwhelming for you.
Look, I've come to realize that I've lost Aiden forever. And I'm trying to wrap my fucking head around that.
I got you, bro. We're not giving up hope, bro.
The damage that these people have done to Aiden. I mean, I carry a picture of my son in my truck every day. And the damage that these people have done and what my son's mother has done to that little boy, in my opinion, is completely irreversible. Like, I'm getting documents from, not documents, I'm getting letters from my insurance, because I still have to pay for his health insurance, on the medications that they're giving him. Like, my son always slept through the night, but all of a sudden now he has insomnia. So they're giving him medications for insomnia. All of a sudden he's got ADHD. Now they're giving him medications for the ADHD. They've got this 7-year-old little boy hopped on so many goddamn different medications. And then on top of brainwashing him to say that he's a different sex. I mean, that poor little boy's mind is so effed up right now. I got a phone call from, going back to the insurance, I got a phone call from a organization called Sydney Health, right? A few months ago. Sydney Health is, I guess, some LGBTQ, and maybe Ted's shaking his head and maybe he can chime in. I recorded the conversation. I played like I was I wanted this to happen to my son, right? So I'm trying to get information from Sydney Health. What are they doing? Are they going to prescribe puberty blockers? Are they for or against bottom surgeries? And the lady on the phone goes, "Well, is your son there?" And I go, "No, he's not here." She's all, "Well, we can't give you any information without your son's consent." I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "My son's 7 years old. I'm in charge of that little boy until he's 18 years old, right?" And they go, "No, we can't give you any information unless your son gives us consent to give you the health information." And that's from Sydney Health. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, that sounds, similar to my experience when my son was a minor. I'm really sorry, Adam. How old is he now?
8 and 7.
Well, they might start him on puberty blockers when he gets to 12, maybe.
Yeah, that's it. And listening to your story and listening to Jeff's story, your story particularly, Ted, on how the court said no surgeries unless both consenting parents say yes. And they still went ahead. Look, folks, they still went ahead and did it, and then hit the father for a $209 bill. I don't know what the price was on it, but a bill that he has to pay. Like, they're just going against I don't know, man. I haven't been this fired up in a quite a long time talking about my situation and Aiden's situation, but they just don't care. They don't care, and no one is holding these people accountable for what they've done. Nobody.
You were talking about Ted's situation just then, Adam?
Yeah.
About, seems like I remember this. Ted, you'll have to apologize. It's been a while since we talked. They wanted you to pay for the surgery that you were not in support of. Is that correct?
Well, it was a secret surgery that violated a court order. So just a couple more things about that. Again, when I first saw the bill, I wondered what could be a $209,820.34 charge, because I've had relatives who've been hospitalized for major illnesses for weeks, and they never accrued charges like that. This was a relatively minor surgery, but a surgery nonetheless, and against the court order. It probably took an hour or less for them to perform this, but it was to insert a 2-inch device, a Soprelin implant. That the device itself at the time, again, we're talking 2020. My understanding in public record showed that was a $47,000 device. So where does the $160,000 go? I mean, for again a 1-hour outpatient procedure. Now, my insurance, I was working for a large tech company in Silicon Valley at the time, that had insurance through United Health, and there was a $3,000 or $4,000 deductible. The insurance covered the rest of that. My ex-wife stated that she had paid the deductible because you don't approve of gender transition. But it begs the question, where did all that money go? And there were in the world of double entry ledger accounting, where did the money go? That's why we need to get discovery in some of these cases, one of these cases, to find out who benefited. Did some of the money possibly go back to a judicial retirement fund or some judicial slush fund? Who knows? It seems that the judges who are teaching classes to other judges and to minors counsels and custody evaluators, et cetera, aren't just doing this out of the goodness of their heart. I can't say specifically what's happening, but it certainly makes one wonder.
That is one good thing. There's supposed to be a bill going through where they're going to have to list all prices now. Like I actually heard Kennedy on Rogan talking about this not long ago. They're making it. They're like, right now, if you want to go to a surgery, you don't know until like the day of or until you've been billed. They was like, nowhere else do you go and then find out what the cost of it is after that you've had it done. You can't price shop, which now they will legally be, required. You can go on a website and find out, well, this one is going to charge me $5,000, but this one right here might have charged me only $3,500. You'll actually be able to go back and forth the way it should have always been. There is so much messed up about this system, but to hear that not only are they going to go against the father's will, but then want him to pay for it. I mean, that's is disgusting, man. One thing I wanted to ask you though, and because I'm learning, this is my first time. Can you explain to me what is the Soprelin, the device, and what is that supposed to do?
Well, it's full of this drug, and it's time release. It slowly dissolves into the blood system. It's supposed to, according to the product insert, it's supposed to remain inserted for 2 years and then replaced after 2 years, if they want to continue the effect. I believe that my son got another one 2 years later, but he would have been 19 when that was replaced. When I found out about the charge and then found out that it was a Soprelin implant, I consulted with a couple of doctors, both of whom told me, Ted, that's really bad, especially since they started him on estrogen at the same time. If you don't get that out, he'll be permanently sterilized in 4 months. So I did attempt to file an emergency motion for removal of the Suprelin implant. Like Adam explained, concurrent to that, my ex-wife filed a retaliatory false domestic violence charge against me, in a temporary restraining order was issued by the judge. And that really sort of derailed the effort to get the Suprelin implant removed. I do recall that the minors' counsel, who had been assigned in that case, filed an opposition to my emergency motion, claiming there was no exigent emergency warranting a hearing, and the presiding judge for Contra Costa scheduled the hearing on my motion 6.5 months later, so about 2 weeks before my son would have turned 18. I've learned since that Judge Hiramoto, who was my family court judge, was acting as the assistant presiding judge, so she may have had something to do with that late timing. The judge who was at the time my family court judge did tell me in a different hearing that even had I prevailed in my motion for removal of the Suprelin implant, that he would not have ordered its removal. He would have cast aside my win, I guess.
Do you think politics played into this with you, Ted?
Somehow the gender ideology seems to be a religious belief system. Maybe it's tied into politics, but it's more akin to a religious belief system.
Okay.
And it's big pharma too.
Well, yeah,
obviously lifelong customers.
Yeah, one of the doctors at UCSF is known. It's documented in Breitbart, multiple articles of Breitbart, that Dr. Rosenthal has accepted more money from Endo and another pharma manufacturer who produce these puberty blocker drugs than any other doctor in the country. So yeah, yet another conflict of interest.
You know, that's one of the problems. Like talking about these cases, any one of us, we've all had our issues inside of the court. To actually sit down and tell anybody what we've been through. You know, I haven't been through anything near like you guys, but still mine was complex too. I mean, it takes a very long time. And if people could find out just what it takes for a dad to be a dad, and in this case, for a dad, not, you know, you're fighting for your kid in court, but to make sure that your boy stays a boy.
Right. Eric, I want to stress though that, you know, Adams talked about his difficulty in obtaining medical records, which he should have the right to see, even if he's not allowed in the doctor's visits. He should have access to those records. The clinics will certainly do what they can to foil that, and they did in my case. After I discovered the bill and was learning what Suprelin was, yet again I attempted to, I had made my request for the medical records in my chart in writing. Had done that shortly after the court order was originally issued, which was ignored. And I had tried obtaining the my chart through phone calls. Each time I'd get put on hold for an hour and a half until they figured I'd give up. One of those times I was on hold, and the voicemail system, or rather the hold system, put me into the public announcements for the hospital, and there was a mention of some temporary change to parking due to construction. But if you wanted to get my chart access, you could go to a certain desk at the hospital in Oakland, which I did. I put the phone down, drove down to Oakland, and found this obscure desk, and sort of played very dumb with the receptionist, and just said I had a son who was in the hospital system, and this clueless receptionist, or I guess not read into the agenda, the receptionist gave me the access. And it was at that point that for about 6 months, I had access to my son's medical records, which were immediately cut off when he turned 18. But I learned that 6 or 7 months prior to the surgery, when he was 16, they had sent him to a fertility preservation clinic and harvested his sperm and cryo freezed it, and there was going to be an ongoing, I think, $1,100 or $1,200 bill to maintain that. So that was
the procedure was reversible.
Maybe that's how they claim it's reversible. That
Good point,
said,
Mark.
kids, they can take it out of deep freeze. Never mind that in vitro fertilization and successfully implanting, zygotes into a woman and delivering it to term is very risky and problematic. But maybe that's how they claim it's reversible. I don't know. But the point is, they did this when the boy was 16. So they knew they were going to sterilize him. It was not accidental. It was intentional. How do you do that to somebody at that age of their life? No. In California, there's multiple laws on the book that say it's illegal to sterilize children. And it's also known that children don't have the ability to consent to their own sterilization. So, it's just problematic in multiple ways and across the board. They just don't care, as Adam says.
No.
Yeah. I mean, some of the side effects that these kids go through too. That's one thing that that a lot of people they don't talk about very often is the side effects of these medications that they put the kids on. They're putting, bone loss, seizures, some of this. I mean, I talked to this guy I did a podcast with. Her name is Amy, but he goes by Matt now. But he was just talking to me about all the side effects that he's gone through since she's been on all these medications. And Chloe Cole talks about the side effects. When I first met Chloe Cole, she was telling me that she's still this was maybe 4 years ago, but she still has bandages on from where they did the double mastectomy, and she has to go back because it's still leaking from where they did the double mastectomy. And a lot of these kids, once they detransition, the health insurance don't cover them. So they have to come out of their own pocket. But the side effects that these medications and surgeries put them through, the androplasty that they do on the little boys, the skin grafts, they do skin grafts. They do, it's absolutely horrendous what they do for gender affirming care, and they say that we're caring for the child. Nothing what they're doing to these children is caring. I mean, the doctors are supposed to do no harm, but they're mutilating these children. They're absolutely mutilating. Huge skin grafts coming from I've seen some horrendous pictures on the surgeries. I mean, it's and they're still doing it. They think they're doing right when they're not.
Ruining these kids' lives.
Yeah,
Absolutely ruining these kids' lives. It'll never be the same.
And the suicide rate from these kids is higher. They say, oh no, if gender affirming care isn't applied, they're going to commit suicide. But in fact, it's the opposite, because they've got these kids on all these different medications. I mean, there's a father in upstate New York whose child was self-diagnosed, was put on Lupron, and the child therapist is a kink therapist, and the therapist is a guy pretending to be a girl. So this child is seeing this therapist who's a kink therapist, and he's also transitioning. I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous.
So, guys, I know we only got a limited number of time to talk on this, and I'm just going to be completely honest with you. I haven't done a podcast in a very long time. I've done maybe a handful in the last 6 months, but even before then, it's been a while. I turn them down all the time, not because I don't want to. It's just there's so much going on. But I started getting some texts from Mark not long ago, and he was telling me about this gentleman that's running to become attorney general in California. I definitely don't interview politicians anymore. I used to do it all the time. I have very little belief in our political system. But there's something about this guy. One, I think he's got a chance. I actually do. But he was in the state of California. And the first thing I thought of was Adam, Younger, and you, Ted. And I was like, Mark, yes. I was like, I'd like to talk to him. But I'm just going to be honest with you, my frame of mind. I'm not looking at this as a podcast or, at the end where we say like, share, subscribe. I want this to be a think tank right now. So I want to do something a little bit different. I don't want to just sit here by the campfire telling the stories. Tell me, I want to know. And you might not have the answers. God knows I don't, as much as I want them. But you've been in the battlefield. You've seen what's going on. What are your thoughts on what we can do to end this? What is needed? What has been some of the things that you went through that the outside world might not get to see, whether it's up here or, anything. The platform is yours. And,
well, I think it's going to take a while, maybe years, to unwind the ideology of the true believers in this. A fortunate thing happened 2 days ago at the U.S. Supreme Court, and that was the U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision, a partial decision in the case Mirabelli versus Bonta. Which was a case that originated in California, in which I think it was Chino School District, some teachers and parents sued the school district over its policy of enforcing secrecy of school gender transitions from the parents. And in particular, I think the key, Mirabelli was a teacher, the key litigant there, who refused to go along with the school's policy. They won in federal court before Judge Roger Benitez, and that was last year. And they won an injunction which was going to stop the implementation of California's law, which allowed, not only allowed, I guess, made a policy for schools to perform the secret transitions and again, hide it from the parents. Rob Bonta, the Attorney General of California, went to the Ninth Circuit and got an injunction. The plaintiffs then went to the Supreme Court on an emergency motion, and that's what the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision 2 days ago, ruled on. And they smacked California and Rob Bonta down, and said that, and they reaffirmed in very clear language that there's a long-established parental right to oversee the upbringing, the education, the health decisions, and religious upbringing of their children. It's a major victory. So one thing I would say to parents watching this, certainly in California and in other states, go to your school board meetings and ask your school administrators, write them letters and hold their feet to the fire. Get them to go on record that they've reversed course, that they're not social transitioning kids in school, and they're stopping these practices, because that's the gateway that will lead, in many cases, to medicalization of these kids. That's the first thing I would encourage people to do. We can talk a bit more about the Supreme Court's ruling in Mirabelli. I think Mark's pretty keen on that.
Well, and it's so important what you just said, guys, because I don't think that gets talked about enough. I mean, we hear about the surgeries, but that's definitely the way the transitions start. Like in Younger's case, Younger would take James, who his ex was trying to call Luna, but would take his boy to school. And then when he would leave, the school would put him in dresses and in a wig. They were socially transitioning. And this can happen so much, through peer pressure and many other things. If you look at the rates of, transgender with children in just the last 10 years and how it skyrocketed, it became like the cool thing to do. And I mean, could have something to do with putting Caitlyn Jenner on the, a magazine as Woman of the Year. I don't know, but it's like this issue came out of nowhere. But yes, I just wanted to hit on that. Mark, Um, wouldn't mind hearing from you for a second. What are some of your thoughts behind this, man? I mean, you've been in here with me in the trenches talking to these guys. I get very down thinking about any type of legislation because I just feel like the system is screwed and the politicians are just as bad as the family court. But I can't be the negative Nancy. There's got to be some light at the end of the tunnel. What are some of your thoughts on what could be done, brother?
So there is the Mirabelli case is one step forward. If you remember a few years ago when we were interviewing Paxton, the AG of Texas, he actually put out a notice letting all the doctors know in Texas, if you do this to a child under 18, not only will you lose your license, but I'll prosecute you. And so that's why the AG of California and Michael Gates, who's the ex-attorney of Huntington Beach, and if you remember Huntington Beach during COVID, that's where Newsom sent the Coast Guard to arrest the guy who was paddleboarding during COVID. So that's how far it's gone with COVID, with the trans ideology. So thankfully, we have someone running for office. Number one, we now have a Supreme Court case law that can be brought into every case. We didn't have that back when Adam and Jeff and Ted were going through this, and then we didn't have the ability to talk about it because they would deplatform us. So we had to ride that fine line of we're going to Turning Point, we're going to CPAC, everyone's on our side, but then I'd come back to California and we couldn't do a single interview regarding it because we'd lose the whole platform. One thing I want the audience to know is it's safe to say, Ted and Adam, so you've been going through this for at least 5 years. Younger's been going through it since James and Jude were 3 and they're now 12. Is it safe to say, so 5 years and at least $200,000 you've had to spend just trying to be a father in your son's life? Is that a safe estimate?
North of that.
Okay, so even north of, which is 200,000 and 5 years is ridiculous just to be a parent.
Yeah, and I'm not anywhere near that. I just didn't have any competent attorneys that would really help me out. I didn't have anybody really.
But you're 5 years in to
Right.
fighting to be a parent, which the Supreme Court just said under its parental rights ruling that under the First, the Fourth, and the 14th Amendment, you guys have the right to be a parent. But for the last 5 years, the California courts have been saying, no, you don't have that right.
Right, and I wonder if that case you're talking about is strictly for the schools, or is that for the broader situation? Because like in my situation, it's what was that?
Well, it can be applied more broadly. So, if I can jump in here for a moment, I've been out of the family court, since for a few years, right? But what happened in my case is there was a black and white violation of a valid court order, which prohibited any gender identity related surgery, which a Soprelin implant certainly was. I also, in the time I've come to know a number of detransitioners. You mentioned Chloe Cole and others. There are others. There's a number who are not with us anymore who had really horrible health consequences and died. I mean, right, there's necrosis and other horrible things. So it's hard not to be moved by their stories. And what's happened in many cases for detransitioners, Layla Jane is a California detransitioner. Her case was killed on an expiry of limitations. They tried to do that to Chloe Coles as well. But that's typically what happens in many of the detransitioner cases, or they're dealing with such horrific health consequences that it's really hard to get it together to mount a legal case. All four of us are pissed off about this and would like to do something, but you have to have what's known as standing to bring a case. So in my case, in my situation, I do have standing. And so I brought a case in the Northern District of California, a federal court, which is a tort action in a civil rights case based on violation of my parental rights over stemming from this violation, the court ordered to implant the surgically implant the serprelin in my son, as well as to sterilize him, again, without my consent or anyone's consent, anyone's proper consent. At the same time, I filed in the state court criminal contempt of court action against effectively the same defendants, the doctors at UCSF, the minors counsel, the lawyers involved in the case, as well as my ex-wife. Since that case was going through a California court, again with Judge Hiramoto quietly acting in the background as the assistant presiding judge, a lot of shenanigans were played. Things were a little bit better in the federal court, but not entirely better. I drew Judge Susan Ilston, who is a Bill Clinton appointee, and turns out that she's read into, or appears to be read into, the gender ideology as well. And she did a number of improper things during my case, such as fabricating a non-existent abstention doctrine, initially refusing to issue any orders in my case at all, and just suspend it and kill it somehow, which we overcome. We don't have time to get into how we got around that, but getting around that did involve or require dropping the criminal contempt action. Judge Hiramoto later, when that case got moving again, then improperly acted de facto as counsel for the defendants and suggested that they plead qualified immunity, which they did. And then when Judge Ilston issued orders, she let them off on qualified immunity. And that's actually the principle that you can't sue the government, that they were supposedly acting within their normal scope of duties, and it's not something that a private citizen can sue for, regardless what was done. And if you take a step back for a minute, are they saying that government doctors can implant kids with puberty blockers and sterilize them without the consent of the parents when these are minors, and there's no repercussions whatsoever for the government doctors who do that? And right now, that's actually, so I did appeal that, took that up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Last October, we had a hearing before 3 judges, and the 3-judge panel agreed with the district court judge and said that they did have qualified immunity. Now, I've since, I guess, informally appealed yet again. What that means is I've filed a petition for rehearing, either by the panel or en banc, meaning by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in its entirety. I filed that in November, and here we are in March. Normally, these petitions for rehearing are handled very quickly, but 3-4 months on, nothing's happened. When the Supreme Court ruled 2 days ago in Mirabelli versus Bonta, my appellate team filed yesterday a notice to the Ninth Circuit with that decision, with the Supreme Court's decision, saying the Supreme Court has said that parental rights are long established, either 25 or 100 years old, depending how you look at it, but nonetheless well established, and that trumps and defeats any claim to qualified immunity. Therefore, we must have a rehearing. So we'll see what the Ninth Circuit says at this point, whether they reverse themselves and give me a trial, or do I have to go to the next step, which I always expected. This is California. It's the Ninth Circuit. It's the most progressive or corrupt.
So for people that don't have Ted's bandwidth, you can take that case to your school board and give them notice. The other thing that you can do is we're flipping House seats and Assembly seats, and that's where all these bills come from. For example, it started with SB 107, then it went to AB 1955, and then AB 957, which we put pressure on Newsom and he pocket vetoed it. So your legislators are the ones who are making these bills. We have an assemblywoman right now who's running in Silicon Valley. Her name's Carol Pelfley. They transitioned her child behind her back. So now she's running for office. And we have Michael Gates running for Attorney General, who day one will sign a notice, just like Paxton did in Texas, saying it's illegal to do anything without parental consent to a child under 18, especially transitioning. And we have Steve Hilton running for governor, who said, I'll do this, 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 and this day one. So we have people that, if we can get them into office in 2026, day one, they will stop this for people that don't have TED or minds, bandwidth to go through all the hurdles and the obstacles of the court system, which we've heard is 5 years and at least $200,000 if you get into this situation.
And speaking of that, another person that's talking about making some changes day one is down at the bottom left of the screen. Mr. Vena is putting his name in the hat, going to be running for office. And as did Younger, man, dude, so courageous. And, I've got your back as much as I can get the word out there. We've been going for a while now, guys, and this is one of those episodes I already knew before we got on here. Probably wouldn't get to talk about everything we want to, but if you're open to coming back, I'm definitely here for you. Before I do let you go, though, really quick, if there is any dads, and every time I do one of these episodes, one of the most common things that happens, I start getting the messages of a dad that's in your shoes when you first started it. I'm going through it now, and I try to give them what advice that I can. You guys have been there, you've done that. If there was a dad out there that's just now finding out his ex is trying to put their kid through this, what advice would you give them after being through what you've been through?
Oh man. That's a hard question to answer. I don't know, because it seems like the court is going to be stacked against you. No matter.
You want an answer, but you don't know that you got one.
Yeah. It's, and that's just me. My personal opinion is, if there's a father out there who's the mother is trying to transition the child, I don't know. You gotta stay cool, and just, I don't know, man. That's a hard question to answer, because I think it's gonna, no matter what, you're gonna be damned if you do and damned if you don't. When you get into the system.
What you said, though, that's good, man. Stay cool. The emotions, because your emotions are going crazy here.
My emotions went crazy. My emotions
went so good, brother, compared to when we first started talking.
Yeah.
But make sure you have support. Yeah, make sure you have support.
I think the one thing that I can really, if there's domestic violence in the situation, right? If the domestic violence is on her against you, report it. One thing that I regret not doing is reporting my domestic violence. Some of the things I rarely talk about on these things is that I was punched in the face. I never reported. I was locked in a room. Never reported. I was drug off a bed. I never reported it. The only time I reported is when I got punched in the back of the head, and they still didn't do nothing for me. I feel that if I would have reported every single case that happened to me, I feel that the situation that I'm in today, I wouldn't be in this situation. I possibly could have full custody of my son right now, and her have none at this point. I think if there's domestic violence in it, report it. I know men are really hesitant about reporting the domestic violence because we're very tough. We don't like to report it, but I wish I would have reported it. And I don't think I'd be in this situation, nor do I think Aiden would be in this situation.
I think they're scared of going to jail themselves.
I was terrified. I was.
I don't want to go too much into my situation, but
right.
How do you call a pregnant woman? You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Oh, are they going to have any sympathy for me right now?
Right. Right.
But yes, I mean that is very true, though, because it needs to be reported. And you see all this money and all these signs out there about domestic violence, but you never see men on the billboard. It's crazy, ain't it? Really quick though, guys. Actually, we was doing some texting back and forth between me and Ted. He's got some stuff that he is very important that he wants to make sure to get out. So you actually got a list here for me, and I want to give you the floor, brother. First off, let's start off about NIH. That was something that we was talking about right before we came on. Tell everybody about the NIH and how they play into this.
Right. So National Institutes for Health began funding a 4-site study into cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers beginning in 2016. And that grant was renewed multiple times for a total of $9.7 million as of last year. Again, the 4 sites were Lou Reed's Children in Chicago, Boston's Children's Hospital of LA, where Adam's son and younger son are being treated, as well as UCSF. I can say that based on my experience, my family's experience, and Jeff Younger's experience at the 2 California sites, that those hospitals have made false claims to the government, to NIH, about their study, and gained the money under fraudulent pretext. They've not reported very little of their findings. One of the papers they did publish looked just at the cross-sex hormone cohort, and among the 300 patients they had, there were 2 suicides. Some experts have said at that point they should have immediately stopped the study, and they certainly should have performed follow-up into those patients, but they didn't. What's known has actually come from the parents of those kids, as well as through public records requests. Jeff Younger and I have a sealed case, which is a false claims case specifically about the NIH grant fraud. U.S. Department of Justice has had that for over a year. The case still remains sealed, but we're hoping that the attorneys assigned to that, who were Biden administration appointees, or I guess persons who joined during the Biden administration, are faithfully and diligently following through on that investigation. We hope we can talk about that more in the future, but what we've learned so far and what we know personally is really quite distressing. As to what parents finding themselves in Adam's or my previous situation can do, Mark said, get support. There are now several organizations that have bootstrapped, in the past 5-6 years. I'm going to name a couple of those that people should definitely reach out to. So Parents of ROGD Kids, that's Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria, Parents of ROGD Kids. Our Duty USA, that's headed by the great Aaron Friday, who most people know. Gen Spect, it's an international organization. Advocates Protecting Children. Partners for Ethical Care is another one. And if you've got an urgent legal issue involving custody and gender is a factor, reach out to Child Parent Rights Organization.
Gotcha. I appreciate that so much, guys. And I promise we're definitely going to have you guys back. This is too important, and we got so much more to talk about. Really quick though, the last question for you before we get out of here, to talk about the guy that I've got coming up that's running for AG. I'd like to hear from you guys specifically. What are some questions that you guys might have for him, or what are some things that you would like to see that I could bring to him when he comes on the program? I'd like to hear from you guys directly.
Well, Rob Bonta, as well as Gavin Newsom, are on the the University of California governors of the Board of Regents. So that's effectively the executive board that sees all of the UC institutions, which would include, the hospitals, CHLA and UCSF. And both Newsom and Bontham are very ardent promoters of this entire idea, and they don't believe in parental rights. So, I would certainly ask those questions to them. And in this case, he's opposing Rob Bonta. Rob Bonta previously was a legislator in California, state legislator, and when he was in that position, he sponsored a bill that repealed a Cold War era law in California that forbade any current and former Communist Party members from serving in any state job. It so happens that the Communist Party had a plan to weaken or destroy families to make people dependent on the government, right? Because if you have strong families, who needs the government? You go to your family for support. If you don't have a family, then you turn to big government for something. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so.
How about you there, Adam?
Yeah, I'm just gonna open it up to a broader. I would like to see the family court, child support, and CPS heavily investigated. I would like to see the family court, instead of being a family court, I would like to see the family court be brought into the criminal justice and have a jury rule on family court cases, instead of one specific person like a judge that could be either bought, paid for, or an activist judge. And I would also like to see cameras being brought into the court system for family law cases, because it's too easy for them to cover stuff up and then either seal a case or, whatever it may be. Family court needs to be wide open for everybody to see, because there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of money to be made in the family court system. It seems to me like there's no money to be made with the safe parent, only the unsafe parent, because with the unsafe parent, the money door is a completely revolving. Everybody's making money in the family court. So I would really like to see those organizations be heavily investigated here in the near future.
I agree, man. And I think they do everything they can just to kind of hide the family courts, even with the transgender issue. I actually had one of my buddies that brought this up the other day, talking about the transgender issue specifically as it relates to politics. It's became a very popular thing to talk about the men and women sports. And it seems like, especially with the right, when they talk about the transgender issue, that's what they talk about. Not so much, the surgeries with children. They did prior to the election, but now it's all about the sports.
Right.
That's the hot button issue, right? And I can't help but think that's on purpose, because if they talk about the other, they have to bring in the courts. It's like protect the money.
Right. And what no one talks about, I know we're going to keep going, but what no one is talking about when it comes to the boys and girls sports is, why are we seeing so many little boys wanting to transition? Why are we seeing this? I truly believe boys do not belong in women's spaces, but we also need to focus on the fact is, why are we seeing so many boys wanting to become the opposite sex? And we need to treat that also. We need to figure out why are all these boys wanting to become the opposite sex, and we need to,
and vice versa, man. You see so many of these women, masculine. It's like flip-flopped. Yeah.
I feel bad for these boys. Like, I really do, because I got my son, and he's going to be going into that, possibly going into those situations, and I would really like to see someone step in and figure out, why these little boys are this way, because it can't all be gender dysphoria. It can't be all that. There's something else going on why all these boys are wanting to transition, and I would like to see that more talked about, on top of keeping boys out of girl spaces.
Absolutely. And Mark, you're going to be on that show with me, so get your questions ready.
I have my questions. If I could leave from my end a positive note, support is number one, because we've been doing this for over a decade, and you got to have support. The second thing is self-care. Don't change your life. Go to the beach, go to the gym, hike, go skiing. Do not change your life
So important, man.
just because you get dragged into this court system, because it will knock you down. Like it, we've got combat veterans that would rather go back to war than to go into court. That is how much of a trauma-based system the court is. So support, take care of your mental and physical health, and then I always like leaving off with hope. So we have a shared parenting bill that's currently sponsored right now in California. We got shot down last year with all of our bills because it's heavily Democratic and we can't even get it out of committee in the assembly. But we have a good shot at getting this shared parenting bill across the finish line this year, as well as we're even talking about possibly bringing in Dr. Farrell to be our expert witness when we do get the bill to the floor. Because who's going to rebut him? He came from both sides. He marched with Gloria Steinem and he wrote the book, The Boy Crisis. So there is hope out there. You may not see us, working in the background, but we are still working in the background to give your kids hope, to give parents hope. You may not see the wheel spinning, but they are turning in the background.
Absolutely, guys. I got one more thing I want to say on our way out, but I want to make sure. Ted, you got anything else you'd like to say before we get out of here, brother?
I've spoken enough.
Gotcha. I just want to. What about you? What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I just want to say it's to the parents out there. Let's bring back the dinner table. You're gonna learn so much from your kids at the dinner table. You're gonna find out what's going on in schools. I used to hate it when I was a kid, having to come home from playing outside to sit down. But now, as I'm older and a little bit wiser, I realize how important that dinner table thing was. Parents are gonna learn a lot about your kids. Kids are gonna learn a lot about their parents. And get rid of the phones at that time and just sit down and talk with your kids around the dinner table.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I definitely so important. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. What as Mark was saying earlier, talking about the censorship, this is a conversation that we had tonight 3 years ago, even or 2 years ago, even. We couldn't have done it because of our social media. And it's gotten a lot better. I can't go live on my Facebook right now because I posted a video showing people about drag queens doing drag shows in front of children. I have a complete block on my Facebook Live. I don't know when it's going to come off. But I remember during that time when you was going through that, Ted, and you was reaching out, dude, that is something that's always weighed heavy on my heart. You and Younger always wanted to do more. But the censorship that they put on us. But I feel like we do have an opportunity to speak now. And that's what I want to use my platform for. And I have so much respect for you, man, for staying on in there. And I'm sorry for all that both of you guys have had to go through with this. And I hope one day we find out the answer for it.
Don't give up. Remember that George Washington lost almost every single battle. He stayed in it for 7 or 8 years, but he won at the end. And that's all that matters if you win at the end.
That's it. All right, guys. I appreciate it there, fellas. We'll talk again sometime soon.